Hello everyone and welcome to today's stream. My name is Mohammed Saeed, and in this series of streams we build a Laravel application from scratch together. The application we are building is an Airbnb-like application where people can go and rent home offices for remote workers. If you are new here, if this is the first time you watch this stream, you can find all the previous streams on the official YouTube channel at youtube.com/laravelphp. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to get notified whenever we go live and whenever we post any kind of video or content on the channel. And for those of you who have been watching the previous streams, in the previous streams we worked and finished the endpoints that are related to listing and managing offices, where hosts can go and create an office, update an office, delete an office, one of their offices. And people can go find offices that are in their area that are suitable for them to rent. So I think last time we worked on updating or on uploading images and attaching those images to the offices. So a single office has many images, and people can upload images and delete images and promote a certain image to be the featured image that will be displayed in the front end whenever users are listing the different offices in the system. So that's where we stopped. Today we are going to do some housekeeping on the code that we wrote for the past 3 weeks, and then we are going to start working on the endpoints that allow hosts and users to rest reservations on their offices, or reservations that they made in the past, or ones that they just made and are dated for the future. So that's what we are going to work on today. So let me start by sharing my screen. Here we go. And this is the to-do list for today. But first I'm going to take a look at the chat. Hello there, hello everyone. Hello from Pakistan, hi there. Hello from India, from Croatia, from Algeria, Tanzania, Pakistan, Latvia, Georgia, Israel, UK, and that's all we have today. We have a lot of people from many countries. I see there are around 40 concurrent users watching the stream today. Glad to have you. Hello from Palestine. Glad to have you here today, guys, because I announced that this stream just an hour ago because I wasn't sure I will be able to come online today, but glad I did, and glad you are guys joining. So let's get started. So today we are going to do some housekeeping. First, we are going to make sure that all images that are related to an office are deleted whenever the office is deleted. So let's start with that. If we go to the office controller that we worked on last time, and we can see here that we delete the office, but we don't delete the images that are related to this office. So this is something that we need to take care of. And in the office image controller, when we delete an image, we first delete or remove this image from disk. We delete it from the storage disk, and then we delete the record completely from the database. And that's what we need to do here. We need to go or loop over each of the office images. So office images each, and then we have the image object here. And what we will do is just copy this and paste it here. Yes. So what we will do is that we will delete the image from the storage disk and then delete the image record before we delete the office from our database. So this should take care of it. Let's run the tests to make sure that we didn't break anything. PHP arts and test. And yeah, I think I deleted this directory, the directory for unit tests, and I shouldn't. So PHP arts and tests, and we can see that all tests are passing. We can write a test to verify that that the images are deleted when an office is deleted. So here it can delete offices. So let's go to the office image controller test and see how we do that. So yeah, we will create a dummy image, and then we will attach this image to the office. So here, and then no, I think that's what we want. Yeah, here. So this, and then we want to assert that this image was deleted after the office was deleted. All right, so let's run this test, and all is good. So now whenever we delete an office from the system, if this office has an image attached to it, the image will be removed from storage and the image model will be deleted from the database before the office is completely deleted from the database. So we have this marked as done. Quick look at the chat. If not planning to write unit tests, then you need to modify PHP unit XML and to remove this directory from the PHP unit XML. Remove the reference from there. Yes, I agree, but I'm planning to write some unit tests later on maybe, so I like just to keep the directory in case I decided to write any unit tests in the future. So why are you looping? So you mean in the office controller, in the office controller test, in the office controller here, I'm looping so I can have an instance of every image, and I take the image path and delete it from disk before deleting the image already. If we don't have any files stored to disk that are attached to the image, if we don't need to clear the disk, then we can just write office images delete to delete all image records in one query. But now we want to delete all the images from disk before we delete the records from the database, and that's why I loop. Are offices soft deleted? What if they get undeleted? If they get undeleted by an admin, the admin will ask, or the user should go and upload new images. That's my thinking. If the user decided to delete an office from the system, a host decided to delete an office from the system, then we will clear the storage, because there is a small chance an admin will undelete this office. We just keep the record in the database, so any reservations that are linked to this office have something to refer to, because if we delete the office completely from the system, the relationship between a reservation and the office will be broken. So we don't want that, and that's the only reason we use soft deletion. So what else? No more questions, so let's continue with what we have to do today. So the other item on the list, on the to-do list today, is to use the default desk to store public images, so it's easier to switch to different drivers in the future. So if we go to the office image controller, we can see here that we interact with the public, or we do store desk, or we store images in the public desk explicitly. Let's go to the file system configuration file, and we can see Laravel ships with multiple desks. We are targeting the public desk by default. We are uploading all images to the public desk, but that will make switching the driver for the public desk in production a bit harder. So for example, while developing locally, we can upload the files to the local file system, but if we are in production, we might want to switch to using the S3 driver. So to make it easier on us to do that, we are not going to specify a public or specify a specific desk. We will just use the default desk, And then later on, we can switch the default disk in production by updating the file system driver. So what we are going to do here is not specify a disk. So let's find all references to public and remove them. So nothing here. Office image. Let's go to the office image or office controller, the one that we just altered, and remove this. And then we can to the office image controller test and find references to the public. Here we don't need to fake the public disk. We will just fake the default disk. Here assert exists. And what else? Where else? Here too. We will not specify a disk, so let's find all references of public in this test class. Assert missing. No more. So let's go to the other controller here, the office controller test, and remove public and remove this as well. Let's run the tests to see what gets broken after these changes, and we are all green. Images are now uploaded to the default file system, and in our case, let's see that if we are overriding this. Yes. So in our case, we are using the local file system here. We might switch to the public file system in development or on staging, so the images are publicly shared by so the file system driver here will be public. And let's run the tests again, and we're good to go. So now all files, while we are developing the application in the development environment, are going to be uploaded to the storage app public driver, which makes them accessible from outside the application via an HTTP request, because they are available in the public storage directory. In production, we can switch to S3 easily by just changing the file system driver environment variable to S3 instead of public. And that means we are done with this to-do item as well. Quick look at the chat. Hello from Ghana, hello from Nigeria. Hi everyone, glad you're joining me today. Alright, no questions. Let's move to the next. Switch to using Sanctum Guard by default. Yeah, this is a problem that one of the community members, I can't remember their name or their Twitter handle, notified me about it, and I was a bit not sure about my solution when I wrote this, but then he confirmed that there's something wrong about it. So let's go to the office controller here. Inside the index method that is used to list all the offices in the system, and we can see here that we are checking if the user is filtering offices by their user ID, and the user ID they are specifying a user ID and it's their user ID, so they are trying to list offices that belong to them. We are going to return a builder instance without modifying it. Otherwise, if they are trying to search for offices that belong to a different user, not the same user, we are going to list only offices that has an approval status of approved and that are not hidden. So if the user is just trying to list their own offices, we will list all offices, the ones that are not approved and the ones that are hidden, so they can manage it. But otherwise, if they are checking the offices that belong to a different user, we will only return offices that are approved and are not hidden. One problem here is that we are trying to find the existing user, the logged in user, by calling auth user. However, in the routes file api.php, this endpoint, the one that interacts with the office control, the index method of the office controller, this endpoint doesn't have any middleware applied, because a guest should be able to access this endpoint and filter offices. And since we reference the existing user and we try to load the existing user here, while we don't have a middleware, the system or Laravel is going to load the existing user based on the default guard, not based on the sanctum guard that we consider as the default guard in the other endpoints. So what we want to do is that we want to make the sanctum guard our default guard. That way, when we call auth user anywhere in the system, it's going to try to resolve the user using the sanctum guard, not using the default guard. And to do that, we will go to the auth configuration file, and the default guard here is the web guard. What we want to do is to make it the sanctum guard. Let's run the tests, and it's not working anymore, so I think we just should switch it back. Let's think about what we want to do here. Yeah, so we want to make the sanctum guard the default guard. We can fix this by calling guard and specifying the sanctum guard. If we run the tests now, they all pass, because this will, and anytime we want to interact with the current logged in user in a middle or in a route that is not protected by a middleware that specifies the guard as the sanctum guard, we will need to call guard first, because before we can call user or ID. But we don't want to do that. We want to set the sanctum guard as the default guard. And I think this should work, right? Sanctum. And we should see one of the tests that are failing to find out why they are failing. So office controller test. Let's find art test filter equals, let's see, it lists all offices. Let's try this test and it's passing. Let's find another test that requires authentication. It creates an office, so let's try running that test. And this one is failing because it's receiving 403. I think it's receiving 403 because it should say sanctum here, specify the guard. Let's try. It's still failing. And why is that? Why do you think it's failing, guys? Any idea? Acting as p guard auth guard, the guard specified, set user on that guard, and then inside the middleware the authenticate middleware. Let's see the guards that are passed. We run this and it's the sanctum guard. So we are authenticating on the sanctum guard. Let's see the authentication here, auth guard check. And the check here should return the sanctum guard, right? So the problem is if you are not auth helper, so helpers. So what are we trying to do here? What if auth user office controller test? I'm sorry about the confusion, but it's a bit confusing. There is a sanctum, right? Acting as method user. What if we use this instead of this acting as? Will it solve it? Nope, not yet. So why isn't it considering the sanctum guard as the default guard? This is interesting. Any idea? Yeah. So it's using, we are setting the default guard as the sanctum guard, but it's not considering it as the default guard. I need to research this a little bit. Don't want to waste your time now. So I'm gonna revert everything. Make sure the tests are passing. And then I'm gonna research this a little bit and let you know my findings in the in the upcoming stream. I'm gonna tell you my findings. But now we should commit web just to commit the changes, and then we will leave this to the next stream. So here, until I research it a little bit more, and let's move to the next to-do. Now, we want to use keyed implicit bindings in the office image route, so Laravel scopes to the office that the image belongs to. And it refers to this tweet that let's open this tweet. Here. So, in this tweet, I just realized that if you used a keyed implicit binding right here, so instead of just image, you use or you specify a key. If you do that, Laravel will automatically scope the query to retrieve the child model by its parent. So when we do that, when we provide a keyed implicit binding, Laravel is going to try to load the image from the relationship between the parent, which is the office, to the image. So it's that way, if you provide an image ID that doesn't belong to the office ID that you specified in the request, it's going to return with 404. It won't let the request pass. And in our office image controller here, when we try to delete an image, we check, we write this check to ensure that the provided image from the route model binding actually belongs to the office. If we do that, so if we go to the api.php and we provide an implicit key, or we provide a key here, we don't have to have this condition. We can delete it, and then in the office image controller test, we check. Here we have a check. Here it cannot delete the only image, it cannot delete this image. So we have a check here where we pass an office ID and an image that doesn't belong to this office. So here we are passing the ID for office, and the image here belongs to office too. And we expect this to return a validation error. Instead, we will get a 404 because we are using the implicit or the keyed implicit model binding. So let's run the tests to make sure that we get what we expected. So art test, And here we go, all the tests are passing. So we can mark this as done. Quick look at the chat. Well, regarding the issue with Sanctum and the default guard, I need to research this a little bit, because I expected when just changing the guard here to Sanctum, it's going to consider this as the default guard. Yeah, maybe we need to provide the guard in this array, but I don't want to waste your time while I research this, so I'm gonna research it and get back to you in the next stream. So let's move on. So we are done with this housekeeping, and this item will be for later. Now we will move to listing reservations, and we will move to the reservations endpoints, where people can list reservations that they made, or reservations that belong to offices that they offer to users. And we will allow users to make reservations and cancel reservations. People can cancel their own reservations, and hosts can cancel a reservation that is done on one of their offices. Right, Gul, you want me to explain the implicit and explicit binding as you changed it. I think you can refer to this tweet. I will paste it in the chat. It will explain it a little bit better. I just linked it in the chat, so you can check it out. Now let's move to the list reservations endpoint. And the rules we have here is that the reservation or the user, before hitting this endpoint, he must be authenticated and have his email address verified. And if he's using the Sanctum API driver, the token should contain the reservations show permission or scope. And a user can only list their own reservations, the reservations that they made, or reservations on the offices that they host or they offer to others. And we want to allow filtering by an office ID only for the authenticated host, so you cannot or a host cannot try to find reservations that belong to an office that doesn't belong to them. We want to keep this data private. And also, you cannot filter by a user that is not you. You cannot try to find reservations made by one of your friends. We don't want to allow that. You can only see reservations that are made on offices that you offer, or reservations that you made yourself in any on the other offices. So these are the conditions we have, and people should be allowed to filter by date range, and they should be allowed to filter by status, by the status of the reservation, whether it is done or cancelled or whatever the status is. So let's discuss that a little bit. I'm gonna switch the scene, but hopefully I will remember to bring it back to sharing my screen before I continue coding. So because this happened in the previous stream. So now let me discuss this with you. Now we want to allow people to rest reservations that belong to them, ones that they made, or ones that are made on one of their offices. In this system, a user can make reservations on different offices, and they can also offer offices for other people to make reservations on. We don't want to allow a user to find reservations that another user has made, and we don't want to allow a host to find reservations that are made on offices that don't belong to them. To prevent that, there is a way. We can write a single controller method that checks all these rules, compiles them, and generate SQL queries that will cover all these conditions, and we can write tests for them and they will pass. But it's going to make the code a little bit complicated because we have a lot of conditions, like if you are providing a user ID, is it your user ID? Are you trying to find reservations that belong to you? If so, we can show you reservations that belong to you and belong to any office. But if you are trying to find reservations that belong to a different user, we will only limit the results to reservations that belong to different users but belong to offices that are yours. On the other hand, if you're trying to find reservations that belong to a specific office ID, do you own this office? Is that yours? If so, we are going to list all the reservations. If not, we are only going to show the reservations on this office that belong to you, ones that you made yourself. So I imagine that it's going to make the code a little bit complicated. It will be harder to read and harder to manage. And also there are cases where, for example, if you are trying to find a reservation, or if you are trying to find a reservation that belongs to a user that is not you and belongs to an office that is not your office, we are going to generate a SQL query that will always return no results, but the query will be sent to the SQL server, and it's a waste of resources. So we want to prevent these situations where we know for sure that the query that will be sent will return no results, so no need to send it at all. But there's another way to prevent that. We don't want the hassle of the complicated code or the hassle of detecting when a query will definitely return no results and eliminate it so we don't overwhelm our database server. And the solution is to separate the endpoints for managing reservations that you make and the endpoint for managing reservations on offices that belong to you. And by this separation, we will have clean queries and we won't have to do any complicated checks in order to ensure that no queries are sent to the database while they are not going to return any results. So this is the solution I'm going to go for. So let me share my screen and so we can do that. So let's start with the API.php routes file. We already created, when we started or when we bootstrap this application, we have a controller for the reservations. Now we will need to create two controllers, one for the host reservations and one for the user reservations. So let's rename this to the user reservation controller, and we are going to rename the class, and we will create another controller for the host reservation controller, and we will name the class like that. And then in the routes, we are going to create a new route group or imaginary group. It's not actually a group for reservations, actually for user reservations. And we will create our first route get, and it's going to be reservations, right? That's it, and it's going to point the request to the user reservation controller on the index method. All right, we will have another endpoint that scopes the reservations to the host, and it will be host reservations, and it will point to the host reservation controller on the index method. So if the API user wants to check reservations that are made by the current logged in user, they should use this endpoint. However, if the API user wants to list reservations that are made on offices that belong to the logged in user, they should use this one instead. So let's comment this for now so we don't receive errors, and we move to implementing the index method on the user reservation controller. So the index, and that's it. If this is not clear to you, let me know on the chat so I explain it a little bit more. Have a look at the pull requests. Yeah, I always forget about that. I'm going to check the pull requests, I promise. So now let's move to the user reservation controller, and we are just going to copy some of the rules. So office controller here, and we will copy this. We want to make sure that the reservations show that the token, if there is a token, it should have the reservations show. And the API here, we're going to use those middlewares on the endpoint for listing reservations. So the user must be authenticated and they must have a verified email address. So inside the todo must be authenticated and verified email address, and the token, if exists, must allow the reservations to show ability or scope or permission, whatever you call it. So now we are going to list the reservations, and we call the reservation on the reservation model and call query, and then we have a rule here that any reservation that's returned from this method must belong to the user. So where user ID equals the current logged in user ID. So we cannot, or we won't allow you to filter by user ID in this endpoint, because it will always return reservations that belong to you. You cannot try to find reservations that belong to a different user. But you can filter by an office. So when the request, sorry about that. So when the request has an office ID, you are trying to filter by an office, query, and query where office ID equals the ID coming from the request. So office ID. That way you can find reservations that you made on a specific office. This is not forbidden. You can totally do that. Let's see the todo again, and the missing filters here are allowing to filter by a date range and allowing to filter by status. So let's see the reservation here. There are a couple of statuses, one that is active and one that are and reservations that are cancelled. So let's copy that, copy the same logic from here. If you are trying to filter by status, then return records that has a status that matches the status that you provide. And we can have some validation here to ensure that a status, or if you provide a status, it is a status that exists in the system. Or we can just ignore that and let the user provide, if the user provide any dummy status that doesn't exist in the system, we will just return empty records. But this will hit the database. So if we want to prevent such query from hitting the database, knowing that it will return no results, we better have validation. It's up to us, like we can decide that later. So let's keep it like that. So this is the filter for the status. Now there is we need another filter for searching reservations that are made within a date range. So let's do that. When the request has from date and it also has a to date, we will need to filter. So query, we will need to find, or we will need to filter the results to find only reservations that started after the from date to the to date, or ended between the from date and the to date, right? Please activate the line numbers. This will avoid many confusion when you split your screen. Not sure how this going to help, but I will consider it. Hello Muntasir. All right, no questions. Let's get to it. So if you are providing a date range, we want to limit results on where between start date. We want to find where between should accept. Let's find the method signature of where between accepts an array for the second value. So where between the from date and the to date, right? We will try to find reservations where the start date is between the from date and the to date, or where is there an or where between? Yes, there is an or where between here. So or where between the end date is between the specified start date and end date. So I think this will return reservations that started between the start date and the end date, or the from date and to date, and it will also return the reservations that ended between the from date and the to date that are specified in the request. So I think that's the condition that we need. Let me know if you think otherwise. We're going to paginate the results, 20 each. And let's go to the Office controller to make sure that everything is as everything looks the same. So yes, we might want to load some related models here. So we might need to load the user, so reservation. Let's see what models that we can load. We don't want to load the user because it's already, we know that it's the logged in users, but we might load the office, and we will load the office images as well. So the office here has a relationship images, and there is another relationship, the featured image. So maybe let's just load the featured image. So the front ends can display the featured image of each office while listing the reservations. And that's it. I think we will just need to return reservation resource collection reservations, and that's all we need here. This should be all we need. Now let's create a test for that. So we will go to the terminal, PHP artisan, make test. This one should be called user reservation controller test. And if we open this test here, we can start by start the first test. So test it lists reservations that belong to the user, and to test that we need to create a user. So user factory, no, not this user class, so user factory create, and then we will create some reservations. So reservation factory for user create, or let's create a couple of them. So count, right, 2, 4. So we will create 2 reservations that belong to this user, and we will create 2 reservations that belong to a different user, or maybe just 3 reservations that belong to a different user. And then we will use acting as this user. If we create a request, get JSON API reservations, we should see some results coming. So let's DD them to make sure, or to see what's returned. Clear PHP Authn test filter equals user reservation controller test, and we can see that it already returned 2 reservations, and each reservation has the office loaded and the featured image loaded, but because there is no featured image, it's marked as null, but the featured image is loaded already, so that's good. So we expect this assert or no response assert JSON count, and first we expect to have 2 records at the pass of data, right? It should be only data, right? So if we run this test, we get green. Only 2 records returned that belong to our user. The other reservations that belong to a different user are not returned, which is what we expected. Let's go to the office controller test to see what other kinds of tests that we we can assert JSON structure to make sure that we are returning uniform JSON types, and assert that each record has an ID. And for the reservations, we would expect an office, we should expect it to be loaded, and we should expect a featured image of the office to be loaded, but I'm not sure if we can do that in the with the current assertion method, assert JSON structure, right? I'm not sure if you can do that, but if you run the tests, this path, including hidden and unhidden, filters by user ID, it filters by visitor ID, it includes images and tags. So we can make an assertion like that. Assert JSON path data 0. So we expect the first office to have an office, right? And this office to have a featured image, right? And this featured image should be null. Just we need to make sure that it is loaded. So if we run the test, it's passing. If you want to make sure that it is actually loaded, we can create the first reservation here. So reservation factory for user, we use this as an anchor. So first reservation for the user, and what am I trying to do? Sometimes I get lost in the middle of writing something and I completely forget what I am trying to do. I'm trying to assert that featured images are loaded, right? So we want to make reservations. So this reservation belongs to an office, and this office, how do we office image controller tests, how featured, how did we deal? Yeah, we create an image. So here we create an image, and this image belongs to the office that this reservation belongs to, and then we update this office. So we update this office to make this the featured image, and that way the response will contain this featured image. So JSON, and we run the test, and we should see the first result here has an office, and the office has a featured image. So the first record should have an office, and the office should have a featured image, and this featured image ID should match the ID of this image. So ID, run the tests, we have an error. Fail to assert that the response count matched the expected. Yeah, because we created another reservation and we are now passing. You see, while I have this test that tests a lot of things. It tests that we can list reservations that belong to user. It tests that we can or there are the featured image is loaded and the office is loaded. Some people, or in some cases, I would split this test to different tests. One to just make sure that we are returning reservations, another to make sure that we are loading the relationships that we want to load, and another to make sure that the featured image actually belongs to the office, stuff like that. I do it in a single test, so with a quick look to one test that tests this endpoint, I can find all the rules that I would expect. That's my personal preference. However, if there are a lot of rules, I prefer to split these on different tests instead of a single test. Let me take a look at the chat. There are some ideas about the reservation controller or the user reservation controller here. Some people think that this condition will not work because we are using OR here. So the query will say select blah blah from blah blah where start date between or where end date between, and then there will be other conditions, and because these conditions are not grouped, the results will be unexpected. I think this might be correct. I'm not 100% sure, but my way of writing code is that I write the code that I think will work just to sort things in front of my eyes when I read the code, and then I write tests to ensure that this code works. And I try to challenge myself to break the tests. And if I couldn't break any test, or I couldn't break the application with writing tests, then the conditions are correct. So yeah, you're right. We might want to enclose these conditions inside a where closure to have the correct results, but we will know if this will work or not when we write the tests. So I think you are right, but we will verify that after we write the tests. King of typo, yeah, I'm the king of typos. I don't deny that. Hello from Italy, hi there. How do you configure Commie Web? Well, alright. Takes you 30 seconds to activate line numbers. I will do that in the next stream. Also, we can add an actual SQL to see the query. Yes, we can do that. When we write the test and we get unexpected results, we can check the query to make sure that it's expected, and if it's not, we can verify it. Why are you using request helper or not form requests? It's something that I prefer. I prefer using helpers whenever possible. And I think there aren't any more questions. So we covered in the tests, user reservation controller test, we covered just listing reservations that belong to a user. We didn't cover any filters in this stream. But actually I need to be somewhere now, so I have to end the stream. And so in the next stream we are going to test filtering by an office ID and filtering by date range, filtering by status, and we are going to work on the endpoints for listing reservations that belong to offices that belong to the user. So this is for the next stream. Any other questions before I go? I think we are good. Is there a reason to explicitly define an office in Wiz? So I think reservation controller, user reservation controller here. No, if we do that, it will just work as expected. We don't, because doing office.featuredImage is going to load the office relationship and the featured image relationship on the office. So if we run the tests, they will pass. So no need to explicitly put the office relationship because we are loading it already while loading the featured image. All right, about CommiWeb, it's just an alias here. This is the function, a bash function that just takes all the input or all the arguments and then configure it or convert it to a get image. So here it loops over all the parameters and concatenates them and then uses it as a commit message and run the get commit. If I don't, so that's it. That's basically what this does. Why never 2 hours of streaming? Because I have other things to do during the day. I'm responsible for handling the support tickets along with my colleagues, and there are many other tasks that I should be working on. That's why I only have 2 hours to spare on streaming, and I prefer to do it on 2 sessions instead of 1, because if there's something that I need to research, I can do that between the sessions. If it's just a long session that is 2 hours, if there's something that I need to research, it will have to wait for the next week. So that's the reason. All right, how can I contact you personally? You can reach out to me on Twitter. Here is my Twitter handle. No, here is, yes, this. Oh, why is it so hard? Yes, this is my Twitter handle. You can reach out to me on Twitter here. All right, so I think we are good to go. Thank you guys for joining me today, and I think it was a great stream. We figured something I was able to share the idea. I was very worried that I won't be able to share why I'm separating the reservation endpoint to 2 controllers instead of 1, but hopefully you guys got that. So I'm really glad about what we did in this stream. In the next stream, I'm going to share with you the results from my research on the auth sanctum issue. I'm going to research that and get back to you. And we will continue working on listing reservations that belong to the user and listing reservations that belong to a host. So see you in the next stream.